welcome into Purple Daily. I'm Phil Mackey, Judd Zulgad, Declan Goff here. And we're going to pay tribute to our friend, Matthew Collar. Cheap plug, by the way. His writing is available at purpleinsider.com. I just want people to know that. If you're wondering where you can find Matthew, he just launched a new subscription-based newsletter, purpleinsider.com. And he birthed a year ago. That sounds weird, but he birthed Hot Routes on this show.
Of all the words you could use, that does sound
Football.
And I would like him to be able to do whatever he wants with Hot Routes. Maybe it gets retired. Maybe he carries it forward and does his own podcast. But we, on Mackey and Judd here version of Purple Daily, are going to debut a segment that we call Four Down Territory.
Come on! Football! Football! Football, yeah! Football! Football!
4 questions. And Declan, if you could fire up some appropriate music for this segment, that would be super helpful. 4 questions.
Football.
Starting with first down here for you guys. The Last Dance has been a wild hit on ESPN, the Michael Jordan documentary. I have 4 Vikings and NFL-related questions spinning off of The Last Dance.
All right.
You guys ready?
Yep.
All right, question number 1.
Yep.
First down. Who is the Michael Jordan of Vikings history, or the closest thing?
You want me to go first? I am going to go. This could go in a few different directions. Not a ton, I don't think, but it could go in a few different directions. And I am going to go with the obvious one of Randy Moss. Moss is a superstar. He is.
I feel like he might be the Dennis Rodman.
He's probably
of Vikings history.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, you could go Chris Carter, who rode players hard, but the fact is, Moss was such an uber talent, and I guess that's where I see him being different than Rodman, because Dennis was really good at rebounding and defense, but he was not a superstar player like Jordan was. I think the closest that you get in talent and mentality in some ways was the fact that Moss had such a will to win, and he obviously didn't play a position like in basketball where he could just take the football and own the football. The quarterback had to throw it to him. But I'm going to go with the fact that I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, who are the superstars of superstars who played probably in their prime as Vikings? Randy Moss, my guy.
I'm going to go Chris Carter. I think Chris Carter, in terms of superstar, Randy Moss is higher up. But when I think Michael Jordan, I think driven, work ethic, grinder. Moss was a lot of those things. Moss also, and so was Dennis Rodman, by the way. I think Moss had more Dennis Rodman sort of distraction, oddball characteristics. And Chris Carter was more like the abrasive teammate that everyone kind of hated, but he was also kind of right about the things that he would yell at players and coaches for. And when you think Chris Carter, you think relentless, like always working out, first guy in, last guy out type of a personality and character. I'm going to go Chris Carter.
And both of our guys have exactly a combined 0 rings.
That is true. So in that case, there really is no true Michael Jordan of Vikings history.
No, there might not be.
Because none of them have rings.
All right, so this guy wasn't as maybe nasty and as mean as Michael Jordan, but he was tenacious, and that was John Randle. I feel like John Randle, even though, yes, he was not a butthole to his teammates, he definitely had a drive to him and an intensity that reminds me a lot of Michael Jordan. And even though that was by the time he left to go to Seattle, I was just starting to learn sports and getting into it. So I don't really remember peak John Randle being a first-team All-Pro for 6 consecutive seasons or whatever it was. But I do remember just this great player who loved to sack the quarterback and play football and would do whatever he takes to win. So I think John Randle's probably the closest one for me.
And John Randle was undrafted. Michael Jordan was the number 3 overall pick in the number 3 overall pick.
Number 3. Yep.
So there's not like a draft comparison, but Michael Jordan, the story is he was cut from his high school basketball team when he was a freshman, right? And John Randle had to claw his way into the NFL. And so there's kind of this self-made story when it comes to both those guys. So I kind of like that one.
And between all 3 of us, we just came up with 3 players who, again, have 0 rings.
Well, we could keep going down the Vikings list, and all of them would continue to have 0 rings, unfortunately.
Football.
All right, second down.
Yeah.
Which Vikings team would you like to see flushed out over a 10-part documentary series, aside from 2009? Because we all agree the 2009 Vikings.
I'd fall asleep. No, I wouldn't. The team that you could sort of do this, and I'm not trying to imply that this would be worthy of a 10-part series, but the one that you could do it with is ending in 98 and going back through Danny's years, which started in 1992.
So like Warren Moon.
Yeah, you could easily do the
Jim McMahon.
The back and forth though between how you brought in Moon and McMahon and all those quarterbacks, and then fast forward to Randall Cunningham joining him in 97 and then flourishing in 98. You could go back to passing on Warren Sapp and then fast forward to the fact that they probably took Moss in part because they believed what the problems were with Sapp and they passed on a Hall of Fame player. I'm not saying that this would be as intriguing as something would be on that ultimately had the 2009 and 10 Vikings, but that 98 season, you could probably justify it or come at least close.
For me, I would actually do it a little bit similar to Judd, but I'd start at 98 and go to 2005, essentially Randy Moss, the tenure of Randy Moss in purple.
Yeah.
I think that would be fascinating just because obviously he comes in the league with such a bang and this great 98 Vikings team, arguably the best team that never was in NFL history, and the roller coasters that it was. I mean, they get to the NFC Championship game again in 2001. They get to another divisional game where they upset the Packers. There was moments where it could all work out, and it just, I don't think it ended prematurely, but it came crashing down pretty dang quick. So just like the tenure of Randy Moss's first tenure here in Minnesota.
You could, if you really wanted the extended version of that era too, you could walk it up, even though Moss wasn't around in 2005. You could walk it up to Love Boat. Like it could just be the end of Mike Tice's run as coach, 98 to the end of Mike Tice's run as coach.
Years, okay? Let's just go up. 10-part documentary on Fred Smoot's time in Minnesota.
I would say, all right, those are both great ones, and 2010 is another one. You could probably do 10 parts on just 2010 on its own, but I think there'd be something fascinating if you had all the behind the scenes footage of the 4 Super Bowl losses, like the entire Purple People Eaters era of football. And NFL Films has all kinds of footage. I don't know if they have like Last Dance level footage where they're at practice and stuff, but wouldn't you guys like to see the inner workings of how a great NFL team operates in that era?
That never won Super Bowl?
100%.
Well, like, right, Judd, we get it. The Vikings have no Super Bowl.
That got to 4 of them and could not win one.
But I would love to see Bud Grant style behind the scenes.
Yeah,
I would love to see,
Stadium.
those defensive linemen, Alan Page
embracing
behind the
cold.
Yeah. Stories about fans freezing their what's off at the old Met.
I do think the problem that almost not every one of these ideas, but several run into is who's the jumping off point. So like who's your Jordan? Now, if we did the 2009-10 Vikings, eventually that becomes Brett Favre, who I think could be that guy.
Well, Randy Moss
Moss could too. But I mean, also if you went back and did what you're talking about, Phil, could you develop things like Alan Page's greatness and who he was? And the potential is yes. I think you could do a really compelling, at least 5-part series off all 3 of those things.
Football.
All right, third down. Which non-Vikings NFL team would you like to see flushed out over a 10-part series? And I'm going to take the Patriots off the board.
That's fine.
Because we'd all probably say the Bill Belichick, Tom Brady Patriots, right?
I can start here if you want, Jeff.
Sure.
I was always a big Donovan McNabb fan. In fact, I think I wore 6th, 7th, and 8th grade yearbook photos of Donovan McNabb. Yeah, I was a big Donovan McNabb guy.
You wore McNabb jerseys and yearbook photos?
Yes. I was a big Eagles guy.
Over the Vikings? Over Culpepper?
I had Culpepper one.
Okay.
How devastated were you when he got super nervous in the Super Bowl and threw up in the huddle?
I was crushed. That's what I'm saying. I wanted to see this Eagles team finally get over the hump. 4 straight NFC Championship games?
Yeah.
I mean, I would love to see those 2000 Eagles, especially when they got T.O. I mean, that was pretty captivating. I wouldn't say I was like a bandwagon Eagles fan, but I just like McNabb so much. So I would like to see something on those Eagles teams that came on the door so many times that they just weren't able to get over the hump. So I'd say the Eagles in the 2000s.
I'm going to go with the mid-'80s and Super Bowl champion Chicago Bears. I just want to see the Ditka, Buddy Ryan fighting. The fact that that Ryan's defensive players absolutely worshipped him and loved him, and Ditka got ticked off. I mean, post Super Bowl, after they beat the Patriots, they carried the defensive coordinator and the head coach off. And the defense carried Buddy Ryan off, and the offense, I guess, carried Ditka off. but just the amount of turmoil with that team, which probably should have won, at least 2 championships and won 1. But there's probably tons of backstories there that would be great. I bet that would be a good documentary.
Those would both be pretty good. The Eagles one feels a little bland to me, and maybe it's just because you're a huge Donovan McNabb fan. I always looked at those Eagles teams as like they were really good, but McNabb was kind of boring. Andy Reid was kind of boring. Andy Reid's more fun now that he wears like Hawaiian shirts to his Zoom meetings, but
he doesn't care anymore. It's great.
There's already a documentary, I believe, called Cocaine Cowboys about the cocaine.
The White House?
No, it's about Miami in the 1980s.
Okay.
What documentary are you thinking of?
The Michael Irvin era Dallas Cowboys with the White House.
Yes.
With the hookers.
I got you. That's
all of those people. All of those people.
That is what I'm thinking of. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. The early 90s Cowboys. The rise of the Cowboys. You know, Michael Irvin, Emmitt Smith, all those offensive linemen.
Jimmy Johnson was
Jimmy Johnson.
Bleeping genius.
And Troy Aikman. Like, there's a few different Michael Jordan-like figures. That Jimmy Johnson could be the Michael Jordan of the documentary. Troy Aikman could be. Michael Irvin could be. So I would put that on my list.
Football.
And 4th down here. If you guys could verbally unleash on a current or former Viking, Michael Jordan style in practice, who would it be?
It's been done, but I'll continue down the Kirk Cousins path.
You would verbally unleash on Kirk Cousins?
Yes, I would ride him every day until he either quit football or started. And I don't think he's changeable, but you know, again, the talent is there. And why do you get to key games and key moments? And you know, not all the time, but far too often he shrinks. It drives you absolutely crazy. He's your quarterback. You need him more than, and he's got the football in his hands consistently. And, you know, Stephon Diggs, how many times could we go back and chart during his time here playing with Cousins that Stephon Diggs was open? And yes, it was a window. It's not like he is wide open for a long period of time, but that's what guys in this league are paid to do. They're paid to hit those guys. It would be Kirk Cousins, and I don't think it's particularly close right now.
Declan, who would you verbally assault?
Okay, so I'm trying to think of guys that I just like genuinely despise as a football fan during a formal years as a sports fan. There's a couple that come to mind. And some of them don't deserve this, okay, like looking back on it, but I just remember despising them so much. I thought Benny Sapp was one of the worst cornerbacks of all time.
Benny Sapp was a quality nickel corner, my man.
To the point
Terrible
where
trade.
My best friend and I still call him Benny the Sapp. Like, I would love to just
Benny
be
Sapp.
Phil can tell you that's not fair. That's not fair. Benny Sapp played a very important role, and actually, they traded him in training camp, I think of 2010?
Yeah.
For Greg Camarillo, who was just useless. Nice guy, but just useless. You never trade a corner for a wide receiver. You're being unfair to my guy, Benny Sapp.
There's also, I would argue that in that era of Vikings cornerbacks, there's like 2 or 3 other guys you could probably pinpoint.
You know who drove me
there's
crazy?
a lot.
More so? Cedric Griffin.
Okay.
I can see that.
Cedric Griffin
And covering him, he drove me nuts at times.
more interested in playing card games in the locker room than
Benny
being
Sapp
an
was a
cornerback.
big roller, though, man. Man, could they gamble on Fridays.
So Benny Sapp is
Benny
your
Sapp.
answer?
Benny Sapp.
All right.
Dwight Smith.
Benny the Sapp.
It's a coin flip for me. And I think just because of the degree of difficulty of like this person's job in that moment being easier than the other person's job, it would be Blair Walsh for me.
Oh,
Purely taking out my 2015
That is such
frustration.
That is such low-hanging fruit to
I'm
take
sorry.
it out on a kicker.
Like, I'm just trying to think of like the most infuriated I've been with
What?
Vikings players who failed at their jobs. And Gary Anderson is high on this list, but Gary just seemed like he was such an accomplished kicker. And
Give me a position
kinda
player.
like-
give me a position
no,
player.
man.
You got to give me a, give me a position
Dude, it was
player.
a 27-yard field goal.
I know.
I don't care if it
but
was
he
cold.
was just mentally weak.
It was a dude, like, I don't care if you're mentally weak. It's a 27-yard field goal. Just put the ball through the uprights.
It's a story for another time, but that was one of the worst days of my life for multiple reasons. On that, when he missed that field goal.
I don't think you can say that and then not tell the story now.
Okay. So I was with an ex-girlfriend at the time. I had food poisoning the night before the Seattle game.
Uh-huh.
And I was a mess all the next day. I was throwing up like every hour on the hour trying to watch this Vikings game. Her house had no heat in La Crosse, Wisconsin, where it was just freezing. It was freezing in there. I have food
Was
poisoning.
she Amish?
Yeah, how can you have no heat?
They were 4 broke college girls is what it was. And Blair Walsh misses that kick. there was a beer pong like table, like a piece of plywood that they put over a foosball table. I went over and just Donkey Kong smashed it, like literally. And I'm not a strong guy. I'm a pretty weak, frail little dude.
Yeah.
And I remember just banging on this thing so hard, it was in shock. I had food poisoning. I'd watched the Vikings miss a horrible kick. I was in a freezing home with 4 other women. It was a horrible day.
Did you break your hammock bone?
No, my hammock bone was totally fine, but it was one of the worst days of my life.
So you're trying to tell me that one of these girls' dads couldn't have sent a bleeping check to heat the place? Like if my daughter, well, I don't have one, but if my daughter calls like, Daddy, we have no heat, I'm going to send her a check to heat the place, okay?
And you just to clarify, because I'm assuming in Wisconsin it was also like 20 below zero on that same day, okay?
Freezing.
Did they not have heat, period?
They like refused to turn it up past like a certain point. Like I could see my breath in the house. I'm not exaggerating, dude. And then I had to ride a train back up after the game. So I had to ride an Amtrak from La Crosse back up to St. Paul. It was one of the worst days of my life.
Wow.
I'm telling you, I was sitting, Judd knows the story. I was watching that game. Well, 2 things, all right? We at the time on 1500 ESPN, we had contractual obligations to run, I believe, a Gopher women's basketball game that day, if I'm not mistaken. And so we couldn't run Ventline on the radio. And at the time, we didn't have like YouTube and different streams. So that kick happens. And it was the only time all year that we didn't have Ventline. And so like, I was watching the game. That was the first time I watched a Vikings game in like 4 years from anywhere other than a studio or the stadium itself. And I remember as the Vikings were walking out to line up for this field goal, there was like 15 people in the room. And everyone kind of like, all right, everyone's stops what they're doing to watch the kick. And out loud, as they're walking up to the line of scrimmage, I said, oh my God, something's going to happen. It was just like, I had an exorcism or something. Oh my God.
It was, I thought about
something's going to happen here. And sure enough, that idiot misses a 27-yard field goal. And first graders write him letters of sorrow. So
no, that's what happens when you draft a kicker.
Blair Walsh.
And you know what? He'd miss more kicks because of it. He'd fall apart more.
He had a good rookie year. Good
Football.
Had a great rookie year. So, my second guy, Bryant McKinney. Because if you ever could have maximized him, he's a Hall of Fame talent. He's one of the greatest talents I've ever seen who, for the most part, didn't give a damn about his talent, and he still played for a long time.
Didn't he show up to camp like 400 pounds one time?
Yeah, he showed up. In fact, they cut him the year that he showed up. It was after Brad was gone. Was it 2011, I think? He showed up to training camp. He was so grossly out of shape that they wouldn't put him on the field because his cholesterol was so high, they were afraid he might die.
Wow.
Which, for this team is no joke. And they were literally afraid he might die and released him, and he signed with Baltimore. His cholesterol was through the roof. This is a guy, though, go back and watch him. 1, he played a long time at left tackle. 2, go back and watch his talent and think about if he cared. Like, if he had maximized that, he is a Hall of Fame left tackle.
But
if he maximized
on the flip side, like, imagine being born and you're 6'7" and 350-pound frame, and you make millions of dollars playing football, but you don't really like it, Like, there's that side of it, too, where the guy was born to make millions of dollars playing football and just wasn't that into it, but just did it for 10 years for the paycheck.
And that's the thing from The Last Dance that Jordan completely can't get, and to his dying day won't get. He doesn't get the fact that guys who play pro sports some of them don't come an iota to being as motivated as he was every single day.
Yeah, there's some people that were born 7 feet tall and like grabbed 15 rebounds a game in high school and were just born to make millions of dollars in the NBA.
I always told you
we're just kind of good just showing up to practice.
I always thought that Erasmus James and Bernard Berrien, who, by the way, again, was not a terrible player. James was not good. I always thought that those guys' biggest problems was they didn't like the sport. And if you don't like football, there ain't no getting around that.
Yeah.
Like, it's a real problem.
Yeah. I don't think Christian Ponder really loved it either. Like, Christian Ponder was definitely not interested.
He's just a quarterback. That's no problem.
Yeah.
It's just a quarterback position.
Dude.
Like Kirk Cousins.
That's another guy that I think
Kirk Cousins
assaulted given the chance.
I think he really likes football. I just don't know that the wiring is there to put the dagger in.
Yeah. Well, there's probably more where that list came from, so we can maybe bring it back on a future edition of 4 Down Territory
Did you say
here.
4? I feel like it needs to be something more.
Football!
4 downs.
We'll have deep voice Manny cut an intro for that at some point. Thanks for listening to Purple Daily. If you are finding us on Apple or Spotify, please give us a 5-star rating and a positive review of it, as it helps spread the word about the show. And if you're interested in subscribing to our YouTube channel, it's very easy. Just go to youtube.com/scorenorth, or if you're here already and click the subscribe button. I'm Phil Mackey. That's Judd Zulgad. And that's Declan Goff. We'll see you next time on Purple